So, welcome back, and I am very pleased to welcome Mr. Pierre Gramegna, Managing Director of the European Stability Mechanism, to this exchange of views. As you may know, the ESM is an intergovernmental organization founded in 2020 by Euro area member states. Its mission is to safeguard financial stability by supporting Euro countries in preventing and overcoming financial crises. This discussion takes place within the framework of the 2024 Memorandum of Cooperation between the European Parliament and the ESM, which aims to strengthen the interinstitutional dialogue and deepen cooperation between our institutions. Europe continues to face significant structural challenges that weigh on productivity and long-term economic performance. Although the single market remains one of Europe's greatest achievements, remaining internal barriers still fragment economic activity. Addressing this obstacle is becoming even more urgent as aging population, climate change, the digital transition, and rising defense expenditure place growing pressure on public finances and long-term sustainability. In this challenging environment, the ESM plays a crucial role safeguarding the financial stability of the euro area by providing financial assistance to member states and helping to prevent potential systemic risk. Today, we are looking forward to hearing from you, dear Pierre, on the recently published ESM 2025 annual report and on the key activities of your organization. So I will give you the floor for your opening statement. Let's say 7 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A session with the ECON members. Welcome in the ECON committee.
Madam Chair, honorable members, dear Aurore, it's a pleasure to be here with you today to present to you the annual report, which also contains the accounts and financial position of the ESM, to share that with you and exchange views with you. This is my first appearance before the ECON committee since the Memorandum of Cooperation between the European Parliament and the ESM was signed in 2024, and I had the privilege to sign that with you, and it was the result of a couple of meetings that we had to prepare it, and I'm glad that today we have this opportunity. We will also have the opportunity to have a mission of the ECON to Luxembourg in September at the headquarters of the ESM, and I think this is also a very efficient way to exchange views and to learn more about each other. The Memorandum of Understanding established a more structured framework for cooperation and exchanging of views. The ESM is an intergovernmental institution, but it is part of a broader European institutional and democratic framework. Regular engagement with this committee helps ensure transparency, accountability, and a shared understanding of how the ESM contributes to safeguarding the stability of the euro area. Just 11 days ago, at our annual meeting in Luxembourg, the ESM Board of Governors approved the annual report, which has since been officially transmitted to the European Parliament. The Board of Governors, which comprises the Ministers of Finance of the Euro area members, also reviewed the institution's recent work and discussed the challenges that Europe faces in a more uncertain and shock-prone world. The annual report shows that in 2025, the ESM operated in an environment marked by heightened geopolitical tensions, renewed market volatility, and increasing pressure on the rules-based multilateral order. In that context, one message stands out clearly. The euro area and the ESM have remained resilient. The ESM delivered a record net profit of €1,970 million in 2025, the highest result since inception. This result was supported both by higher interest rates and by the performance of the ESM's managers who outperformed the benchmarks while remaining prudent. This growth in the ESM's reserves strengthens our capacity to respond in times of market stress and uncertainty. With 81 billion euro paid in capital and a reserve fund of around 7.2 billion euro, the ESM is the most capitalized international financial institution in the world. That capital is not used directly for lending. It underpins our AAA rating and allows us to raise funds at very low cost. Our maximum lending capacity of 500 billion, of which 433 billion euro are available, is a form of insurance against financial instability. And like a good insurance does, its value lies in the fact that it is there when and if needed. But beyond the figures, the annual report reflects something more fundamental, the continued relevance of a common institution built on resilience, solidarity, and credibility. This is why DSM matters, because there are not abstract principles, but practical requirements for safeguarding financial stability. Let me start by insisting on resilience. That means having the institutional and financial strength to respond when conditions deteriorate. This is reflected in the ESM's balance sheet, its lending capacity, and its ability to act in support of euro area stability, which contribute to keeping sovereign spreads contained. Solidarity, second feature, remains central. The ESM continues to serve as an anchor of stability for its members, underpinned by shared responsibility and mutual trust. And third, credibility. This credibility is built through strong financial results, prudent risk management, and close cooperation with our European and international partners. The ESM and the EFSF, which is under ESM management, are an integral part of Europe's economic and institutional architecture. The credibility of the euro area and of the ESM as its safety net continues to attract new members. When the ESM was inaugurated in 2012, 17 countries were sitting around the table. Today, the euro area counts 21 countries. Following Bulgaria's ratification of the ESM treaty, its accession as the 21st member of the ESM will become effective next Monday, on the 29th of June. This is an important and positive development for both Bulgaria and the euro area as a whole. In this year's annual meeting, we also had the privilege of welcoming, alongside the ECB representative and European Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis, also the IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva for an exchange on global challenges. She stressed the importance of strong cooperation between the IMF and regional financial arrangements, such as the ESM, as a cornerstone of the global financial safety net. In a more shock-prone world, that cooperation matters for crisis preparedness and for safeguarding financial stability. That discussion was particularly timely. The environment we face today is different from the one in which the ESM was created. Europe is exposed to new sources of risk, and financial stability can be affected by shocks that are geopolitical, economic, financial, or of strategic nature. This is why the debate on the adequacy of crisis prevention and crisis response tools is so important. At the annual meeting, I recalled the progress made in the follow-up to the ESM toolkit review, including work on precautionary instruments and on the indirect recapitalization instrument. At the same time, important questions remain open on how Europe can best equip itself for more volatile world situations. In that debate, the ESM stands ready to contribute constructively and pragmatically. Let me conclude with a simple point. The 2025 annual report is not only a record of a successful financial year for the ESM, it is also a reminder that Europe needs strong, credible, and agile common institutions. In a world of growing uncertainty, the ESM remains resilient, solidary, and ready to act in support of euro area stability. I'm looking forward to your comments and questions.
Thank you, dear Pierre, and I will open the floor and give the floor to Markus Ferber for 1 minute and a half.
Ja, vielen Dank und vielen Dank für diesen Erfolgsbericht, der aber doch ein bisschen getrübt ist, weil im November 2020 hat sich ja die Eurozone auf eine Reform des ESM-Vertrages verständigt, um den einheitlichen Abwicklungsfonds als Letztsicherung für die Bankenabwicklung zu verankern. Das ist bisher von einem Euro-Staat noch nicht ratifiziert. Die Kommission hat in diesem Jahr erneut auf die Überführung des ESM in den EU-Rechtsrahmen plädiert. Könnten Sie uns ein bisschen was erzählen, ob es hier Fortschritte gibt? Und dann habe ich noch ein zweites Thema. Im April diesen Jahres hat sich der ESM und die EIOPA auf ein gemeinsames Diskussionspapier verständigt, das sich mit dem Management der Risiken von Naturkatastrophen auseinandersetzt. Und dabei wird eine Versicherungslücke von rund 75% auf der Basis historischer Schäden beziffert. Und dieses Papier schlägt einen Risikopool auf europäischer Ebene vor zwischen 10 und 65 Milliarden Euro. Und implizit, nicht richtig, aber impliziert ja doch gesagt, dass der ESM diese Letztsicherung einnehmen könnte. Warum müssen wir uns hier mit diesen Fragen auseinandersetzen? Warum beschäftigt sich der ESM mit diesen Fragen? Haben Sie vor, Ihr Mandat auf dieser Ebene zu erweitern? Vielen Dank.
Thank you for your questions. Obviously, 2 questions. One is about the amendment of the ESM treaty, which was negotiated over the years back in the last decade, and I was part of the negotiation as a finance minister, as you well know, and it was signed and then ratified by most countries except for one. Let me first say that the countries that joined the ESM at a later stage, including Croatia and Bulgaria, which are now part or about to become part, Bulgaria next week, of the ESM, have ratified the existing treaty and the amended treaty. So we have, at the present juncture, 20 countries that have ratified and 1 country that hasn't ratified. So as long as that country doesn't ratify, the treaty, the amended treaty, cannot be made operational. This is unfortunate because in that amended treaty there is one major improvement, which would be an additional tool for the ESM to be the backstop of the Single Resolution Fund, and we have also earmarked some amounts of money to be reserved for that function. Now, you are all aware that ratifying a treaty is the privilege and the sovereignty of a country. So I am regularly in contact with the Italian government about this. In fact, I was also in Rome last Friday to discuss this item and other items. And it lies in the hand of the Italian government and the Italian parliament to decide to ratify or not ratify. This being said, what is important is that despite this absence of ratification by Italy, the ESM treaty is playing out fully and is operational apart from that backstop. So I think it's important also to underline that we are there, present, and that despite this absence of the amended treaty, this has no impact on our existence or on our many tools that we have. On your second question, it is not the intention to signal any necessity to enlarge the mandate of the ESM, but we as ESM have 2 main tasks. One is to support countries when they are facing financial difficulties to refinance their debt, meaning they have difficulties to access financial markets, as it happened in the last decade. So that's what you would call the crisis resolution function on the one hand, and on the other, one is to prevent crisis. And I think it is accepted and recognized that the precautionary instruments that we have, which are in the treaty, and preventing risks and analyzing the risks is a very important one. And that's why we dedicate some time and some research to analyze which risks exist. And one of the risks that we have identified together with EIOPA, obviously they are gathering all the insurance companies, we recognize that the risk of climate change on public finances is growing with time. And only a quarter of all natural catastrophe risks or other climate change risks can be insured in today's world. So we have a financial gap in terms of what insurances can do. So that research that we're doing together with the ESM is saying that eventually one could imagine a setup which resembles the ESM to cover the 75% that cannot be done. But the fact that we participate in this research and analyzing the preventive role, and analyzing the potential of these consequences, I think is totally in the remit of our work. So in a shorter answer, we are not claiming here that the ESM should have that role. We are just finger pointing that climate change can induce risks of financial stability.
Thank you. For the SND, Jonas Fernandez.
Muchas gracias, Chair. Un placer tenerla aquí. Bienvenido. La verdad es que cuando he tenido que explicar en los últimos años la respuesta de política económica de la Unión Europea ante la crisis derivada de la COVID, siempre he insistido mucho en las diferencias en cómo Europa abordó la crisis financiera y fiscal de 2010, a partir de la cual se funda el ESM, y la crisis generada por la COVID, a partir de la cual logramos poner en pie el Next Generation EU, financiado con deuda solidaria y deuda comunitaria. De alguna manera creo que una estrategia y la otra son distintas y, en mi opinión, en el futuro deberíamos seguir más el ejemplo del Next Generation que créditos individuales a los Estados a través del ISM mediante condicionalidad. Pero bueno, esta es mi opinión. Dicho esto, usted ha hecho referencia a las dificultades para revisar el tratado ante el retraso en la ratificación en Italia. Y también me gustaría indicar que en la crisis de la COVID ustedes crearon una línea precautoria sin condicionalidad que ningún Estado quiso solicitar. Me pregunto si el actual ISM, en su papel de backstop del Fondo de Resolución Bancaria, no acaba de encontrar acomodo ante el retraso en la ratificación del nuevo tratado, que en la crisis de la COVID puso en pie una línea precautoria para ayudar a los Estados que ningún país quiso solicitar. En fin, ¿cuál es el futuro de la institución y en qué momento podamos comunitarizarla o no, o cualquier otra vía que podamos pensar para viabilizar la institución o no? Gracias.
Thank you. So, as you rightly highlighted, the ESM had proposed back in 2020 a special tool which was called Pandemic Crisis Support. And this instrument would have had as a conditionality that if you were to access that tool, you would have to commit to spend the money or spend the money and then finance the expenditures for health purposes. This instrument was one of the answers to the COVID crisis next to NGEU, the SURE program, and in the end was never used. It was not used, and this instrument has also been cancelled 2 years later. So that event showed that inside the existing treaty, there is some flexibility, I would call it flexibility, or there are ways and means to design tools that can answer crisis. Now, the major difference between what the ESM can offer and what NGEU can offer is that, one, the ESM is intergovernmental, so it's not EU law. Second, the ESM can only extend loans and not grants or subsidies. So I think these are the two major differences. The third one, you could say, is the conditionality, which also is of a different nature if you compare NGEU with the ESM, although, as I've just said in the beginning, the conditionality here was in a way linked to the type of crisis that we had, a health crisis. And that would be my first answer. The second question was, what about the ESM becoming a wider institution with as many members as the European Union? Well, for that to happen, the 6 countries that have not yet reached the stage where they would like politically or economically to join the euro area depends on those countries. So as long as we have countries which are outside the euro area, we will not have the same membership. But apart from that, apart from the membership, we are, for the time being, an intergovernmental institution. So it's a different way of functioning. And the main difference is that the ESM can only take decisions or major decisions by consensus. Whilst in Europe, as you all know, there's different mechanism, different set of laws, depending on the type of decisions that you take. So we as management obviously have to work in the remit of the treaty as is.
Thank you. For Renew, Ludovic Todor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There are not too many people in the room, which is a good sign, because, you know, otherwise in crisis times it can be overcrowded here. But I also would say that there are important developments which made you less relevant. I will try to explain it. The first one is, of course, the various monetary policy unconventional measures which parked in the ECB a big chunk of government debt in the euro area. And there is still more than 3 trillions there. The second one, already mentioned in NGEU, that actually governments were able to spend a bit more than just from their own budgets. So that is an additional money which was there, so not creating additional impact on their budgets. So there are two camps, actually. First one, they are saying that with this new instrument at the ECB, the conditionality requirement will be never or not likely tested in the near future because there are also unconditional means together with the NGU funding. And the second, there are people who are saying that actually if there is a move towards more common debt, maybe the ESM can play a role as a kind of a debt and liquidity management agency for the euro area. I'm not judging these proposals. I'm just curious, what are your views on these two ideas?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. I agree with you. It's excellent news that there are so few members of European Parliament in the room. I regret it nevertheless. I would have been happy to see more and engage, because what we're discussing is extremely important. It would deserve probably hours of discussion, what is better and how the future will look like. But let's look at it historically. The ESM was born in the midst of a financial crisis. We did not have a rescue fund in Europe, so Europe once again was able to find a smart institutional solution that had been not really thought about. when you think about it, it's quite remarkable that we created a common currency in 1999 without having a lender of last resort. So, in the emergency, we created the ESM. In the next emergency, which was COVID, we went another route. And I participated in those discussions. And when we decided on April 9, 2020, all the measures of NGEU and SURE and also the EIB had this measures that were specifically done for the purpose, and the pandemic crisis support for the ESM was also decided. We have chosen another route. You are right. And we have also chosen an unconventional route in terms of monetary policy. So we have now more tools. How all these tools interact remains to a certain extent to be seen. But the interaction with the European Central Bank is well known. The European Central Bank has two major instruments that interact with the ESM, which is the outright monetary, T stands for transaction, no? OMT, so outright monetary transaction, which can only be triggered by the European Central Bank if a program is negotiated with a country and debt sustainability is ensured. And the other one is the transmission protection instrument, which is more recent, the TPI, where also the European Central Bank says this can only be looked at if that sustainability assessment is done, amongst other by the ESM. So you see there are interactions. Last but not least, I would say we all become wiser with time, and we are definitely only to be called in as ESM if there is no other solution. And it is clear that it is easier for a country to go for a program like NGEU, where half of the amounts available are grants, where the conditionality is extremely limited, and it is also national programs mainly, compared to going to the ESM, where you have a heavier load of programs, especially if we are looking at resolving existing crises. If it were the precautionary loans for the ESM, which have never been tested yet and never been asked for, you could say that's an instrument where there's room of maneuver for the ESM. And last but not least, you asked me about, the ESM is issuing bonds. We have issued bonds up to 300 billion to support 5 countries last decade. We're still refinancing that and issuing more or less 25 billion bonds every year, issuing mostly in Europe and sometimes in dollar. So we have a huge expertise, and if member countries would like us to play a bigger role in being issuer for others, is something that is being mentioned once in a while, also by the Commission in one documentation. But it is also important to keep in mind that the legal framework under which these bonds are emitted are of different nature depending on which institution we talk about.
Thank you. For EPP, Fernando Navarrete.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for attending this dialogue with the ECON committee. I would like to ask you on how the ESM is preparing for the future, in particular in prevention and management of banking crisis. So there's been a lot of discussion on how to deal with the so-called liquidity and resolution problem, and the ESM has come up as a potential solution. So I would like to hear your vision on what role the ESM can perform in terms of solving the crisis and resolution problem in Europe, potentially with a backstop or providing counter guarantees in favor of the Euro system. My second question is, for such a complex arrangement to be set up that includes different organizations, how much of a problem is that the ESM stands outside of the EU institutional framework, and therefore the governance, as you explained, is different from what the other institutions participated? Third question, how dependent on the ratification of the new treaty is necessary, whether ratification of the new treaty is necessary for all these potential new arrangements for liquidity resolution to take place, or do we have enough flexibility within the current treaty? And final point, what is it? Is there any limitation, hard limitation, by which the ESM cannot provide the counter guarantees directly in favor of the Single Resolution Board instead of having member states and then having the ESM with a precautionary line? Thank you.
Yes. So thanks for the excellent questions. We would need more time to really go into details on your 4 questions. Let me try to answer most of it. I speak about the issue of ratification at the end. So, what is foreseen in the amended treaty is that the ESM would be the backstop for the Single Resolution Fund. And that is foreseen in that treaty, and it will be very easy to put that into operation if needed. That's why all this was done. Now, historically, when this was negotiated, what we were focusing on more as member states was about needs of liquidity in case banks would have difficulties with their capital. Now, in the last years, the needs in terms of liquidity has slightly shifted, and the attention has shifted towards liquidity, not necessarily in the capital, but the global need of liquidity. And that's why, on top of what is foreseen in the amended treaty, there's this discussion where many players are involved, Commission, ECB, Single Resolution Fund, and we are also in the loop in a kind of preliminary reflection to see how do we solve the weekend liquidity issue that happened with Credit Suisse. How do we have enough liquidity for that? And here the numbers are extremely high because for the Credit Suisse, we're talking roughly $200 billion of Swiss francs in one weekend. So these numbers are so high that we need a cooperation between institutions. So that's why all these institutions are working together, and they are not of the similar nature. I agree with you. I would say the answer is where there's a will, there's a way. If you consider tomorrow as European Parliament that it is good for Europe, and the answer for me is clear, it is necessary for Europe to have the backstop that is in the amended treaty, to have eventually additional liquidity in case of liquidity issues of the weekend, if we can call them that way, then we will find a solution to have the different institutions work together. Now, can the ESM play its role as backstop to the Single Resolution Fund without the treaty? Theoretically, one could think of looking into a plan B, but for the time being, there is plan A on the table, which is a very efficient way of achieving what we need to do. So going through another route would be much more cumbersome.
Merci. Je me donne la parole pour vous poser une question.
Alors j'écoute en original.
Vous écoutez en original, cher Pierre. Il y a tout un débat aujourd'hui, on vient de l'avoir d'ailleurs avec Christine Lagarde, sur le rôle international de l'euro et la possibilité pour pouvoir y parvenir d'avoir un CEF7. Est-ce que vous, le spécialiste de la stabilité financière, est-ce qu'un actif sûr nous permettrait en fait d'acquérir un peu plus de stabilité financière, même si la stabilité financière va bien au niveau européen? Et comment voyez-vous, puisque le rôle de l'ESM est très discuté, vous voyez, avec l'évolution, comment voyez-vous, dans cette perspective aussi, le rôle de l'ESM dans cette nouvelle architecture? Moi, je suis tout à fait en faveur de garder tous les outils qu'on a, parce que c'est toujours dans les moments comme ça d'euphorie que les crises peuvent arriver et qu'on a envie de simplifier, enlever des institutions, etc. Moi, je pense qu'il faut au contraire tout pérenniser. Mais est-ce que vous voyez une évolution de votre rôle aussi dans le contexte actuel? Merci beaucoup.
So I'm going to answer in English, although my French is good enough. But as we're talking about finance, probably easier to keep the language of Shakespeare. European safe assets. I know it's been now in the mind of many. There have been lots of articles, lots of reflections. I also attended recently a conference where a lot of good ideas come to the forefront. I'm going to give you first my personal touch to it, and then try to go more deeply into your question. For the time being, the European safe assets that we have is bonds of the European Investment Bank, bonds of the European Stability Mechanism and its predecessor EFSF, and bonds by the European Commission. In the three cases, what happened historically is the following. There was a crisis or an emergency, or in the case of EIB, there was not a crisis or an emergency, but there was a clear purpose back in the 60s to say we need to do these loans to support countries, to develop bankable projects, to innovate, and that's why we created the bonds. So in the three cases, we said the key is what we want to do with the money of Europe, and then we find a way to do it, and then we have these European safe assets. The discussion that has been triggered now over a couple of years is to say the European safe assets as such have a value. So because we lack the depth of financial markets compared to the dollar market, we say this is a big deficit. Yes, it is. But for me, having a discussion, we should have more European safe assets because this gives us slightly better rates, more liquidity, is putting the cart in front of the horse. So I'm not sure it's going to help the discussion. Let's take defense. Now, I take defense in general, not only viewed from the ESM. If we want to do something on defense together in Europe, very vaguely said, should we say we need more European safe assets because it's good to have European safe assets, and by the way, we should do that for defense? Does that make more sense than saying we have a huge issue on defense because we should do more together on defense? It's very vague what I say. And then you say, well, if we want to do it together, where do we find the money? And then you could say, some say the ESM could play a role in that. The Letta report says that. The white paper of the Commission says we have now the SAFE program, 150 billion. If we get to the limit there, the ESM could play a role. Just to be very clear here, when this happens and we're being asked, we as management are very eager to work with the countries and those who have these ideas. But it's not the management that decides if we're going to do that or not. It's an intergovernmental institution, and we need consensus to do it. I think it's our responsibility as management to be open for ideas. I know some in the room here would find this very positive, some would be neutral, and some would find it terrible. But such is life. But what we cannot do is just say we don't want to discuss it. So, you see, your question allows me to say that I find pushing to the extreme the idea that we need to have European safe assets because it gives us a more liquid market, a more depth, is not such a good idea. Because in the end, what you need is political consensus from most sides to say, defense, I could have said climate crisis, or we could have said geopolitical turmoil, a war, or, well, all these things that when you think of it, there's one common denominator. And maybe if you allow me one more minute on this, I think this is very important. many of us has the tendency to look at the ESM only through the lens of what was done in the last decade. And what do I mean by that? The lens of the last decade. The ESM was invented to support countries in need. And so we say the ESM is there. If there's a financial crisis, then some countries have to do reform programs and then they get support. So they think in that manner. And in such a situation, you can also say the country that has problems, they are self-inflicted because the country didn't have a good budget policy. And so that's also why they need to reform their economy and so on. But COVID was different. COVID, everyone had a problem. It was an external factor. And that's why we did NGEU, because everyone had a problem. But that's also why we did the pandemic crisis support, because we wanted to insist on the fact it's not that someone is more responsible, one country is more responsible than the other, it's just that it is an external factor that creates eventually the need for a common response. And I think if we integrate that precedent of COVID, external factor, there was a pandemic, we can take another external factor, the war in Ukraine, which led us to have the SAFE program. Now defense, tomorrow, defense is also an external factor. So how do we deal with external factors that potentially create financial instability? That is really the question that we should all ask ourselves. And then opinions diverge. We as ESM, as management, have the following attitude. Whatever the triggering effect is, an external factor, a national factor, a geopolitical one, you name it, and it has a potential of weakening the financial stability of the euro area, this is exactly in our remit.
Thank you. Any catch the eyes? No?
Well, I would like to say that I look forward to continue this discussion in Luxembourg in September to receive your delegation. And I think it is in the best interest, and I will finish with that, it's in the best interest of Europe at this juncture to look into all the possibilities that exist. I mean, the ESM is the highest capitalized international financial institution in the world. My friends from school whom I meet, they tell me, Pierre, you're sitting on 500 billion euro. What the hell are you doing with it?
You should not tell this to a French politician.
No, I know. And I tell them, this is not how it works. This is not how it works. On the other hand, just saying we don't want to use it at all is the other extreme. So where can we have a smart combination? Where does it make sense eventually to use part of the capital that we have for precautionary instruments, for credit lines, to start something? I think that's where intellectually it becomes really interesting. So not going for the extreme, the ones who would like to finance projects with the ESM, we're not there to finance projects. We're there to support countries. I think if we were to try to transform the ESM in an institution that finances projects, I think the likelihood to have support of majority of countries is very low. But if we stay in the remit of financial instability risks, wherever they come from, if they have an impact on the financial stability of all the member states or some member states, that's also why we have capitalized this institution so much. So it's a way of looking at it in a smart way that stays in the spirit of the ESM. I think that would be for me the most important message for you. And again, from our side, you will always receive an open ear to discuss it, what are the limits of what is possible and so on. But we will not sit there and say no.
Okay, good to know. So we'll be in Luxembourg very soon.
Very good.
Since no is not an answer.
No, it's not.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for the exchange of view. And as you just mentioned, we'll be in your institution in September, right? September, okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.